Hey folks, Tom Norfleet with www.citizenshipquickly.com. I wanted to share some information with you today that I got from Bloomberg. Stated that there was the date is November the 23rd, 2019. Bloomberg stated that 16,700% rate of return in 50 years makes Seng Index world's best. The reason I want to bring this out to you, so many people in the U.S. And other countries too, but the U.S. especially, are so centered on their local markets that they never really participate in other type of markets. And the reason I bring this out, most people don't know this, but the S&P 500 beats approximately 80 to 90% of the mutual funds managers out there long term. And I'm talking about an index that has beaten the S&P 500. And it's done it pretty substantially. In fact, this is over a 50-year period, starting in 1969. And the article, I'm just going to, there are a couple of paragraphs here. It says, a mirror to Hong Kong's fortune since its 1969 launch. They're talking about the Hang Seng Index launch. The Hang Seng Index has become a reflection of China's economic rise. The benchmark stock gauge marks 50 years since its official debut on Sunday. I assume they're talking about this past Sunday because today is actually Saturday. So we're looking at from last Sunday past 50 years, that 50-year period. If you compare it with the S&P 500 index, the S&P over that time period did a little over 9% rate return. Now you might say, well, 1%, actually it was a little over 1% more than the S&P 500. You might say, well, a little over 1%, that didn't sound like that much. Let me tell you, a fraction of a percent beating the S&P 500, especially over 50 years, is a big, big thing to look at. Now, there's several reasons why this occurs. One reason is its proximity to China, and China is, of course, a very fast-growing country, and the Chinese are very ambitious and they're very shrewd people. They're great savers. But there are two other things you got to look at. Hong Kong doesn't have taxes on income that's made, a corporate tax rate on income that's made outside of Hong Kong. So we're talking about a country that doesn't have to pay any taxes on any corporate taxes on money made outside the country. Another thing too is, even on the taxes they do have to pay internally on income made inside for a corporation, you're looking at around 16.5%. And that changes. I think it's been as low as around 15 or even 14% in the past. But that's substantially less than what the U.S. and other countries long-term have charged on their corporate tax rates. That money's passed down to the consumer. There's more money to be made when you're not paying all this out in taxes. Another thing is Hong Kong doesn't have tax dividends. Even if you've relinquished your U.S. citizenship or you're doing all your stuff offshore, you got to remember when you go in stocks in the S&P 500, the ones that do issue dividends, you got a withholding tax on that. You don't escape that. Okay, now you can escape the capital gains tax if you're not a U.S. citizen, if you're not, if you're offshore and you're not in a tax resident country that taxes worldwide income. But you don't get around the dividend tax. You have to go into countries that don't tax dividends. So isn't it nice to go in an index that not only beat the S&P 500, but you also didn't have any dividends any taxes on those dividends? That's a big added plus. Let me give you an example how well this index did. Now, I'm not telling you to invest in the Hang Seng Index. I'm just telling you the opportunities that are outside in the offshore world if you participate in this. But you need to do your homework before you invest because, like I said, Hang Seng Index has had periods where it's dropped over 50%, from the high to the low in its bear market time. So you got to take that in consideration because there are time periods you could put your money in there several years later be worth less than what it was. Now, I'm looking at long term, and that's what you should be looking at too. So, you're going to have ups and you're going to have the downs, and you should be dollar cost averaging and doing this to get through that. But the point I'm trying to make is the fact that for every dollar invested 50 years ago to 1969, when these dates were established, and Bloomberg was talking about last Sunday, 50 years back from that point, $1 US was worth about $168 US for every $1 invested 50 years ago. Now, if you look at the S&P 500 index, and you look at total rate or average rate of return over that period, I figured that out. It's about 10.79% over that time period. S&P 500 did roughly, I'm giving you rough figures, not exact. These are rough figures. S&P 500 did a little over 9%. Now you might say, 1% is not that much difference, but it is. In fact, a fraction percent beating the S&P 500 is big stuff. And if you can avoid the tax on that money too, that's a ball buster for you right there. So anyway, these are just some tips right here that you ought to be looking at. If you got a question or comment, just put it in the comment section below. Also, if you want new videos, hit the subscribe button. We'll get them out to you as soon as they come out. Look forward to talking to you. Take care. Bye.